Showtime. Hi, everybody. I'm just waiting for some sign at my end that we are live. We're going to do it live and that I've got a quorum. A lot of things that I want to get into, a little preview of what I'll discuss on CNN today, as well as a recap of what's in the news. How busy is the news? Oh, there's Tom Rogers. Okay, Tom, you're my sign of life. And Jamal. Hello, Jamal. How are you? And Sean. Can always count on you guys. Thank you so much. Uh, yeah, that's great. Okay, so we're rocking and rolling already. You want to know how busy the news cycle is today? The news cycle is so busy that in the 4 segments that I get on CNN every Saturday at 9 a.m., today I will not be doing that horrific incident at the Capitol that cost yet another Capitol police officer his life. I will not get into Matt Gaetz, and there's a lot new in that regard. You can go to the Daily Mail or Business Insider for that. But it's a hard process to try and determine. You know, on radio I get 15 hours a week, but on television I get 1 hour of my own time, meaning when I'm not on with Cuomo or somebody else. And it really equates to about 40 some minutes of programming broken down into 4 blocks or 5 if we really go quickly. And there are too many other things competing for my attention today, not the least of which is the subject that is the focus of today's survey question at smerconish.com. And if I inputted properly here at Facebook what I intended as a title of this brief conversation, it was no shoes, no shirt, no vaccine passport, no service. Because we're all, of course, familiar with that edict, on the boardwalk when you want to go in and get an ice cream or a piece of pizza at the Jersey Shore, no shoes, no shirt, no service. Well, is it okay for a business to say no shoes, no shirt, no service, and also to say no vaccine passport, no service? This, like everything else, has become a partisan issue. And Ron DeSantis yesterday signed an executive order saying he will not permit that to be the case in Florida. By the way, do you know how you can tell that DeSantis really does view himself as presidential timber? It would be by the signature on his executive order yesterday. Look at this. Like, that's Trumpian, So the order says, among other things, I can't read the whole thing to you, but there's like the official order from the state of Florida. Whereas requiring so-called COVID-19 vaccine passports for taking part in everyday life, such as attending a sporting event, patronizing a restaurant, or going to a movie theater, would create 2 classes of citizens based on vaccination. And then further ahead, businesses in Florida are prohibited from requiring patrons or customers to provide any documentation certifying COVID-19 vaccination or post-transmission recovery to gain access to, entry upon, or service from the business. So this is really interesting to me because, as I've said on television, it forces Republicans, in particular Republicans, to hitch their wagon. It forces Republicans who hitch their wagon to the interests of business, small business in particular, being the entrepreneurial lifeblood of the country. I happen to believe that. But it forces them to choose between a business wanting to run its own environment as it sees fit and the sort of individual liberty, Gadsden flag, individualism, don't tread on me wing of the party. So you've got a business man or woman who in their establishment, doesn't have to be small business, it could be Disney. It could be a cruise line. It could be the Florida Marlins or the Miami Dolphins, who say, hey, we want there to be some type of a requirement that a person has to use smart technology, print out a pass, do what you do to board an aircraft, and show us that they've been vaccinated so that we can have a large gathering. It forces Republicans in particular to decide, are we going to be loyal to those businesses, or are we going to be loyal to those who say, hey, it's my right not to be vaccinated? And Ron DeSantis, and he's not alone, Kristi Noem, a number of Republicans are saying, we think it unfair. We think it un-American, I think was Noem's quote, for businesses to make such a requirement. Now, meanwhile, IBM has developed this smart technology that they think makes it easy. And in New York, Governor Cuomo, branding it as the Excelsior program or Excelsior Pass, some such thing, is already using that technology. So, for example, you could go to Yankee Stadium, they could fill the joint with people who've been vaccinated. And on your phone, it wouldn't be a ticket into your medical information. It would simply be confirmation that you've been vaccinated, or you've had a test in a different circumstance. You've had a test and you don't have COVID. It's incredible to me what a flashpoint this issue has become. Oftentimes, I'm in conversation with the people who work with me on CNN as we begin planning the Saturday show, and we're talking about what's in the news. And I'm oftentimes saying, you know, there's a story out there and it's getting some attention, but it's not getting the attention that it deserves. I can tell from the phone traffic that this is a real hot talker. And this is one of those stories. So the survey question today at smerconish.com asks, should private businesses be permitted to require so-called vaccine passports? And Ron DeSantis in Florida says no, he will not allow it. Imagine this. Think of this now. Disney can say, we don't want you, no matter what the gun laws are in Florida, this is private property. You are not permitted to bring a firearm into the Disney World property. And that would be permitted. In fact, that is their policy. But if Disney wanted to say at some point, because I think this is premature, not enough of us have been vaccinated, right? But when, say, a month from now, vaccines are plentiful, according to DeSantis, Disney World would not be able to say, like they can for guns, you can't come in unless you've been vaccinated. Because, as he says, that would create two classes of citizens based on vaccination. Well, look, I say, isn't the goal to be one class of citizen, everybody vaccinated? It's a great issue, and I'll talk about it today. And if you want to post comments here, as I can see so many of you are doing, I look forward to reading them later because they scroll by too quickly now, and I've got too many other things that I've got to do. What else? Okay, Chauvin. I've got to talk about the Chauvin trial. The Chauvin trial was significant this week for a number of reasons, not the least of which was blue on blue. Blue on blue. You had two senior, one now former, but two senior police officers from Minneapolis who testified that the force was excessive. That's what was most significant in my mind about the trial this week. The first of them was recently retired Supervisory Sergeant David Plager. This is the guy who spoke to Chauvin on May 25th. Why? Because he got the phone call from the 911 operator. Do you remember her? Jenna was her name. She felt the need to call in because she was watching a stationary camera and thought what she was seeing was appalling. My word, not hers. So the supervisory sergeant then has a phone conversation with Chauvin. Chauvin does not immediately tell him that he put a knee on Floyd's neck. And then after there was a sidebar conversation, this I guess was in the Thursday testimony, Plager was permitted to testify that the force was excessive. The question was whether Chauvin's force was appropriate, and he said, at what point did it no longer become appropriate? And he said, when Mr. Floyd was no longer offering up any resistance to the officers, they could have ended their restraint. Which to me suggested, by the way, that maybe the knee initially wasn't excessive, but certainly when Floyd was no longer putting up any resistance, then that was the point at which they should have withdrawn the force that they were using. That was the first guy, blue on blue. The second guy was the longest serving officer in the Minneapolis Police Department. He testified yesterday, Lieutenant Richard Zimmerman. By the way, he was the final witness yesterday, I think the 19th of the week. You always, this is like an old trial lawyer trick. You want to run that clock on a Friday appropriately so that you leave the jurors with something impactful. And the prosecution certainly did that with Zimmerman yesterday. He testified, quote, pulling him down to the ground, face down, and putting your knee on his neck for that amount of time was uncalled for. So a lot of emotional testimony. I'm not minimizing any of the bystander remarks, the eyewitness observations, but what I thought was most significant, not one, two cops have now said this wasn't appropriate. And from within his own department, like not a hired gun expert, but two supervisory officers. Whether the police chief in Minneapolis testifies, we don't know, but that's said to be coming. We'll wait and see if it happens. So the Chauvin trial also has my attention. Lead story, New York Times today and all across the country, Major League Baseball not coming to Atlanta for the All-Star game. Is this an overreaction or is this appropriate? I want to drill down on my program today and briefly with all of you on what's at stake in the Georgia law, because the way in which it's characterized, well, the president calls it evil, calls it un-American, says this is Jim Crow 2.0. When you drill down on the component parts of the Georgia law, is it as problematic as it's made out to be? The Wall Street Journal lead editorial yesterday, quote, Georgia's law does make it easier to vote, though it also tries to reassure citizens about ballot integrity. Listen to this. The state provides far more days of early voting than New York. It offers no excuse absentee ballots, unlike Mr. Biden's beloved Delaware. So who's really suppressing whom? Georgia's new law puts limits on drop boxes, but as Delta's Mr. Bastian now regrets pointing out last week, it also makes them a permanent part of the voting system. In 2019, before COVID, drop boxes were illegal. I'm interested in the so-called line warming provision because the background of this is of interest to me. I've got so many frickin' notes. I hope I don't get confused. Here it is. So Georgia's law used to say this: no person shall solicit votes in any manner or by any means or method, nor shall any person distribute or display any campaign material, nor shall any person solicit signatures for any petition, nor shall any person other than election officials discharging their duties establish or set up any tables or booths or on any day in which ballots are being cast. Again, this is the old law pertaining to conduct at the election polling place. This code shall not be construed to prohibit a poll officer for distributing materials as required by law, which are necessary for the purpose of instructing electors, or from distributing materials prepared by the Secretary of State, which are designed solely for the purpose of encouraging voter participation in the election being conducted. Well, according to Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, and others, there were problems with people for partisan purposes trying to curry favor with voters in giving them food and water. Raffensperger in December issued a memo, and it said that he has taken action to crack down on political organizations and advocacy groups that use line warming as a loophole to conduct political activity in violation of state law. So what's line warming? It's giving away a gift or a favor to somebody in line so as to win their vote. The first thing is nobody should be in line long enough to need a drink of water. Like, holy shit, are we third world? That's the big observation that I have about Georgia. But my point is there were already laws on the books, and now they've strengthened or critics would say made more suppressive. The language, here's what it now says. This code section, the new law, nor shall any person give, offer to give, or participate in the giving of any money or gifts, including but not limited to food and drink, to an elector. They're not the only one. There are other states that similarly have that requirement. But of course, the soundbite version of that is to say, oh my God, in the hot Georgia sun, somebody's out there for 3 or 4 hours and you can't even give them a glass of water. There's also a provision that says there can be water stands. What they don't want is a Republican or a Democrat, an activist, NRA, Black Lives Matter, whomever it might be, now using that gesture as a way when people are standing in line, ready to vote, to curry favor. They don't want politicking in line. They've just gone an extra mile to ensure that it doesn't include food and drink. By the way, like Montana, by way of illustration. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. Obviously, this is to Fox viewers, this is cancel culture run amok. The Atlanta Braves aren't happy. Brian Kemp is not happy. I just, I'm a believer in nuance. I'm a believer in critical thinking, factually driven thinking. And I'm wondering, and again, I can see all the comments that are flying by me here, is the Georgia law as bad as it's being characterized? Or is it setting a predicate for getting rid of the filibuster and voting in H.R. 1? That's the question. I thought I had something else I wanted to tell you. Well, that's a pretty full load, don't you think? So thank you for being interested in the current events and the thoughts that I like to share here. It's a standing commitment, live 7:30 every Saturday morning, preceding my CNN show at 9. I'm really excited about my YouTube page and the videos that we've been posting there, which give you a back of the house look at the radio show, usually one element per day, where you don't just get to hear it, you get to actually watch the interview or the commentary that I have delivered. So check out the YouTube. TC will put it in this mix, I hope, a link right here so that you can very easily go over to my YouTube page and see what we've been up to there. And TC After Dark launched always a new episode this past Thursday. You should enjoy that this Easter weekend as well. So happy Easter to all. Stay safe. And thank you so much for being interested in all of these different platforms that I'm behind. I'll read your comments later in the day when I've got a moment to clear my head and be able to really pay attention. Hope you'll watch CNN at 9 and go vote on today's survey question at smerconish.com. Should private business be permitted to require vaccine passports? It's a great, great question. All right. Happy Easter. See ya. Wore my Easter tie. I'll see you soon.